So this video is going to be on creating a neurodiversity-inclusive summer camp and potentially applications to just neurodiversity-affirming schools in general. Um, so the special guest today is Jenna, who's my business partner, and we've been trying to create summer camps for a couple years now. So I guess I'll just jump into the first question, which is, what are some of the goals of our camp?
I was so excited when you, Sam, presented this idea because it felt like this is something, this having a camp where we are centering disabled experience and disabled joy, and then also prioritizing access and the needs of children and campers and families with marginalized identities, and specifically children that have higher support needs that may not have access to other camp experiences. So I think what we have really tried to center is that our camp is autistic led, and we want our support staff to um, be led by disabled people and have our children have disabled role models and mentors and support staff to not only receive support but also share joy and explore. And we've had camp in different places, such as a church preschool that was kind enough to offer their space for a camp. We had it in a more nature-based outdoor setting, which was really fun and very wet for 1 week when we had a lot of rain, but we got to explore a lot of different things and really just have fun and feel like we had a place and we were creating places for autistic, disabled, neurodivergent children and people to come together and have a fun experience during the summer to play and explore. So if you could travel back in time to our first camp,
Yeah.
which was like, yeah, almost 2 years ago now, what do you wish you knew about creating an inclusive camp? Do you have things that you could tell our previous selves or other people that things that we've learned that that you could share?
Yeah, I mean, probably I would like write down the weather and tell us what the weather would be in advance so we could plan for every week. But as far as things that actually generalize, um the first one kind of on my list is understanding volunteers' needs and activity preferences in as much detail as the campers' needs. I know when we started camp, we definitely wanted to understand how our campers communicate, what kind of sensory um processing they have, like what's pleasant, what's unpleasant, what activities they like. Um, but we did ask volunteers about accommodations and accessibility, but I think learning that in more detail has been really helpful so we can figure out which campers and volunteers might, and generally speaking, enjoy the same kinds of activities. Or yeah, like whether a volunteer might more enjoy being in kind of the indoor space or the outdoor space, just different little things like that are helpful. Another very specific one is asking about, and I wish that schools in general and camps would start doing this because once I learned about it, I thought it was such a cool idea, is asking about lists of gestalts and having parents send in kind of unique phrases that their child might use that have a special meaning to their child, but that others might not necessarily know. Um, like for example, my own child will say, I think he'll say like sign say, and it means that he wants you to read or label whatever he's pointing at. So if he like points to the door and says sign say, he wants you to tell him that it's a door. But when he's with a new person, they won't necessarily know that, and so it's like they might feel a little confused, and he might feel frustrated because they're not responding to what he's trying to communicate. So I think when kids come in with when we know sort of what they might say and how we can understand that communication the best, like having a dictionary on hand, that's really, really helpful and wonderful. And the other thing that I think camp has really given an opportunity for is learning about what types of trainings, and this is definitely something I'd like to learn more about in the future, but what types of childcare trainings are actually most helpful for volunteers. Initially, I think I was very theory focused, where I thought that if we kind of share the motivation for why it's important to be neurodiversity affirming and why neurodiversity can be, beneficial, that would be the main component of the training. And what I found is that it seems like volunteers are often most looking for really specific information on how to, for example, support a child with safety concerns, with elopement, kind of getting to know the child's communication. And so I think coming up with uh, more case studies is something that we've definitely been working on. And there's a lot of areas where I really wish there was a way to kind of know the optimal solution to these case studies, because sometimes it's it's not even clear. It's easier to write the case study than to write the actual answer or solution for it. And then the last thing that's kind of related to that is when we ask about safety concerns in camper applications, that's something we always want to know so we can figure out how to support each camper as best as possible. But what I had not adequately considered initially is that it's important for us to make clear that these questions aren't meant to weed out applicants. I think so often when families see questions about like, can your child, and we don't phrase it this way, but if the question comes across as, can your child keep themselves safe at camp? Someone might be nervous that if they write no, that the application will either not be considered or will be considered less, when that's definitely not at all the case for us. And so I wish I knew earlier on to really clarify that we're only asking that with the goal of supporting campers. And I guess in general, I wish that other schools or camps kind of had that approach as well.
Mhm.
But yeah, that's kind of my list of things. What about for yourself?
Yeah, I think everything that you said makes so much sense, and I think so much I agree with everything. I think as an occupational therapist that has also been working in spaces that have not had the same theoretical framework that we have had, I think the folks that like were interested to kind of join and um learn, I think it would be really interesting um to like, especially connected with you that has so much data and research focus. I think if we could also like have collected more data and figured out how to really have more research to see how this could be implemented um in more spaces, and maybe like not just for summer camp, but like how can we continue to grow these spaces, because I think the benefit um would not just be for summer camp. And so yeah, I think if we had the bandwidth and if we could go back in time to collect more data points, maybe that would be something else I would like to do.
Yeah.
um
Oh, and that's a good point. I think even just remembering to get feedback is so important,
mhm.
because we have all these, I think, great goals, but if we're not stopping to actually see whether people find those goals are being achieved and or what could optimize it, then
Yeah.
we're probably not going to fully meet our goals. Um, so the next question is, what are some of your favorite memories of camp?
Yeah, I I had the privilege as one of my jobs to be kind of camp photographer, so I was able to kind of move around camp to help support, but also to share in so much joy and excitement from what was happening and be able to capture them in pictures to then create collages at the end of the day to share with families and campers to kind of review what their day looked like. And I think that was really magical to be able to kind of just see all the connections that were happening, and to um be able to see we had a very rainy week one year, and just had kids that were splashing in puddles, throwing balls in the rain, just getting, for someone that really enjoyed that sensory experience, that was like a really really fun day. I think having our junior counselors or our our volunteers that might have been teens and doing some of the work as also volunteer hours to maybe go to college or for high school or to be like in a graduate program, to be able to have this experience that may not have had the same type of um, approach or theoretical framework as other places that have supported children with disabilities. So I was really grateful and thankful that seeing people who are interested in doing this type of work as a profession or continuing it as they are growing, to have this experience and to really like be able to have an experience where it is so child-led that they're figuring out and being curious about what is interesting and joyful for the child and seeing what they can do to engage um and share that joy with them, which was a really beautiful thing to be able to um witness and share. How about,
Yeah.
did you have some favorite memories from camp?
And maybe just if I can just expand a little bit on what you mentioned about child-led, the way that we've currently been approaching the structure of camp in order to make it child-led is that we'll often have a couple different activity stations at a time. So children can essentially spend the whole day. Well, it's a half day camp, so they can spend the whole half day at one activity if they want, or they can float around to different activities. Um, but we were trying to balance that between how we can, create that flexibility, but also make it so that there's some structure for children who enjoy that. And so they don't necessarily feel like they have to just float around the same set of activities for a week straight, which could be a little bit monotonous. So sometimes we will have other things brought in. Like I think we had puppets before. We had a sprinkler thing. So there are sometimes, I guess, unique activities that show up that can be group activities, but there's no pressure for children to participate if they don't want to. Like there's always a backup option available. And I think that structure has worked pretty well. But as far as favorite memories of camp, I enjoy the energy that children have. I think the speed and the energy is something that is is pretty fun. It kind of takes your mind off anything else because you're so busy sort of running after children and trying to keep up with them and figure out what their interests are. Um, but I also really just enjoy, and this sounds strange, but it's meant well. I enjoy when camp is done because it kind of signifies that, fortunately, so far in our case, I think it's always signified that people had a good week, like that it was completed, and that I think watching people go home happy on the last day always meant a lot because it meant to me that probably they enjoyed, or hopefully they enjoyed their time throughout the full week, and that's really what my main goal was for the camp. Yeah, I think our last question is, what do you feel are next steps, or what do you still want to learn about creating inclusive camps or schools or programs?
Yeah, um I was also very fortunate to be able to participate in the City of Durham and NCCU's equitable community engagement course this past year. And through that course, it was amazing to be able to hear other people doing work in equitable community spaces. And I think it really highlighted and prioritized the needs for, or highlighting the barriers that we currently have at camp that I think we would really like to be able to remove, such as transportation, um, being able to provide food, being able to provide um, camp at no cost to any of our campers and families, not have the cost of the camp be a barrier. We try as much as we can to have sliding scale and scholarships, but still recognize that it is a cost to families that may not be able to or might be a hardship. And then being able to since we do have one-to-one support for all of our campers, being able to, currently we provide stipends for our volunteers, but really being able to financially compensate all of the people that are supporting the camp. So I think as we continue to grow and look at how we can provide more equitable, accessible access, I think identifying what barriers we want to try to just lower first and figure out if how we want to go and do that. Yeah. Do you have thoughts, Sam?
Yeah, definitely what you mentioned about just being able to offer more access. I think longer camps would be great. I would love if someday there's a inclusive school or something that can last, not just for a couple of weeks in the summer, but be more ongoing. But on more of the just personal curiosity side, I've wondered a lot about what a neurodiversity affirming practice would look like if there was a longer program. I think currently, since we're with children for a short period over the summer, we've prioritized just trying to let them rest and play in a way that's most fun for them. And part of the reason for that is because it's a camp that's really meant to be fun. It's not a super serious educational environment, although certainly we encourage them to learn if that's something that they are interested in. And also because so many of the children are um, children with higher support needs who are typically not given a lot of access to recreational activities. A lot of the environments are in probably are, educational environments or therapeutic environments where there's always a specific goal that they have to work towards. And I think it's healthy for anyone to have at least some point in their life where they don't feel like they must be working towards a
Mhm.
goal at all times. But I have wondered what would it look like if if we were a school or if there was a school somewhere that was fully neurodiversity inclusive, how would they balance being child-led with the fact that sometimes children do benefit from a little bit of gentle prompting over the long run, and some people do enjoy a certain amount um of healthy pressure. But I think like figuring out what that threshold is for each person and figuring out what yeah, like what a healthy type of prompting a child towards an activity that they might not initially be as interested in, kind of knowing when to back off, figuring out how to optimize that over the long run is something that I don't think there's been a lot of research on. We are going to put put a link to our camp donations page just for this video. We essentially run as a basically as a nonprofit. We're not formally a nonprofit, but we use effectively all the money from camp to create volunteer stipends and sliding scale camper spots. And well, I never intend to like turn this YouTube channel into a promotional series. We have had kind of like one video per year where we fundraise for camp, and so this is our yearly video on that. Um, but but I guess outside of that, if anyone has thoughts on what made, I guess, either camp or educational experiences positive for them, and specifically, I am really curious about the concept of healthy stress, and how it relates to neurodivergence. So yeah, that's something I would be very interested to read any thoughts on. But yeah, thank you again for watching and take care.